This episode is brought to you by the Denver Fringe Festival. This year, the 6th annual Denver Fringe Festival takes place June 5th through the 8th. You can see over 70 shows at 20 venues all around Denver. There will be pop-up performances, the Fringe Art Show, and free shows at Kids Fringe. Tickets are available online for just $20 per show or $95 for a full festival pass. Go to denverfringe.org to grab yours now. That's denverfringe.org. Today on CityCast Denver, progressive activists in Denver have taken on a new target, Palantir. Since the mysterious defense contractor moved to the Mile High in 2020, Palantir has become one of the city's biggest and fastest growing companies. But now those activists are calling attention to the fact that the company's growth has come thanks to lucrative new contracts to provide AI software services to the likes of ICE and the Israel Defense Forces. Dozens of Palestinian solidarity protesters interrupted Congressman Jason Crow and Senator Michael Bennet at town halls last week to raise these issues. And protests have been growing outside Palantir's headquarters downtown. So today, as more and more Denverites are wondering about this massive tech company and why it is the way it is, we're happy to reshare a conversation producer Paul Caroli had back in 2021 with Max Chafkin, a Bloomberg Businessweek reporter and author of The Contrarian, a biography of Palantir co-founder Peter Thiel. Today is Monday, June 2nd. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about.
Max Chafkin, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, we are going to talk about Palantir, which needs maybe the tiniest bit of introduction for listeners. It's a billion-dollar company. It moved its headquarters here to Denver a year ago, but as the Denver Business Journal recently put it, they are emerging from a stealthy cocoon that they've been in since arriving. They were a marquee sponsor of Denver Startup Week last week. They recently moved into a bigger office downtown. But also, we have the privilege of this new book, The Contrarian, your new book, Max. It's the first real serious biography of Palantir's founder, Peter Thiel. So what better excuse to talk about this company? And I think we have to start with Peter Thiel. Who is he and why is he worthy of such a thorough piece of reporting?
So he is a venture capitalist, a technology investor who has been involved in, many of the most important companies that have been founded over the last, I'd say, like 25 years. Probably most famously, he is the co-founder of PayPal, the way people buy and sell stuff on the internet. And he sort of parlayed that into this career as an investor, during which he was the first outside investor in Facebook, really, kind of like one of the key, probably the key mentor and advisor to Mark Zuckerberg. He has basically been involved with, dozens of companies that you've heard of, Airbnb, Lyft, SpaceX. Pretty much any tech company that you've heard of is connected to Peter Thiel in one way or another. Either he's an investor or one of his close friends, members of his network is an investor, or, it's like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon or something. You can get to Peter Thiel very, very quickly. And all of that would be, I think, very, like interesting enough reason to write about this guy, just because, obviously Silicon Valley has grown a lot and he'd be a way to understand Silicon Valley's power if it weren't for this other twist, which is that Peter Thiel is also a major political figure, especially in conservative politics. He was early supporter of Donald Trump and has kind of positioned himself as a patron, kingmaker, kind of like Koch brothers type figure to the far right. Now all this is interesting, but Thiel also has this view that kind of overrides pretty much all of this. And that view, which I think has been very influential in tech and does have kind of a political dimension, especially when we start talking about Palantir. And the view is basically that tech companies are creating the future and that tech founders are this privileged class of person, that they should have maximum freedom, maximum leeway to build companies and to make the future happen as quickly as possible.
Well, let's talk about that future you said Peter Thiel has been trying to make happen for a second. And we'll fast forward just a bit through his early life and pick up in the early 2000s. He's co-founded and sold PayPal at this point, and it's around the time when he's meeting Mark Zuckerberg and investing in Facebook. Where and when does Palantir come into this?
Yeah, so PayPal had developed this technology, or it's not even really a technology, more like an approach to dealing with money laundering and other kinds of fraud on the platform that involved network analysis. So looking at who is selling what to whom, and use that to try to figure out what are the legitimate transactions and what are the bogus ones. And if you remember, post 9/11, there was this sense, especially on the Republican side, but I think most Americans kind of had this sense that we had failed to do enough to stop the attacks. And in particular, we had failed to kind of like sift through the enormous amount of information that these hijackers were generating. So you had guys taking flight lessons in Florida and buying one-way plane tickets. And you go back to the 9/11 Commission report, right? There's a discussion about whether we could have picked up some of these signals. And so Palantir was basically Peter Thiel taking that approach and trying to sell it to the U.S. government as a solution to the problem. So we are going to bring Silicon Valley engineering to bear on this very difficult problem of data mining for security.
The more we know, the more terrorist plans we can prevent and disrupt, and the better we'll be able to protect the American people.
And so that was Palantir, and it basically was growing, but not growing that well. Kind of just, like I said, sort of puttering along more or less until about 2016, when Trump was elected, and shortly after that they started getting a bunch of gigantic contracts. So now Palantir, you said $1 billion company. It's actually like more like a $50 billion company. I mean, I haven't checked the market cap recently, but yeah, they're worth in the tens of billions of dollars. They have I'd say billions of dollars in contracts with the government, as well as lots of big contracts with big companies who sort of like the idea of applying this, military grade technology as they see it to business problems.
Are you still quoting 30-year-old movies? Have you said cool beans in the past 90 days? Do you think Discover isn't widely accepted? If this sounds like you're stuck in the past. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. Welcome to the now. It pays to Discover. Learn more at discover.com/credit card, based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
This episode is brought to you by Xcel Energy. The demand for electricity is growing, which is why, for more than 150 years, Xcel Energy has been improving the energy network as Denver grows. They've also committed to Colorado's goal of being completely carbon-free by 2050, and they're working to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030, all while continuing to power Colorado's economy. Xcel Energy is investing to advance Colorado's ambitious clean energy goals while supporting Denver's innovative economy and maintaining an energy infrastructure that can handle severe weather events. They're also investing $22 billion in the next 5 years to deliver safe, reliable service at the lowest possible price. This means more clean sources of energy, more efficient distribution, and more reliability. Also, you can watch the next game or just flip on the lights. Do you know how hard it is to explain where energy comes from to a 3-year-old? Montgomery's like, Mom, where does electricity come from? And I'm like, Xcel? Want to know more? Visit xcelenergy.com/Colorado for more information about how Xcel Energy is planning for the future. That's xcelenergy.com/Colorado.
Running a business comes with a lot of what ifs, but luckily there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
So Thiel leverages his relationship with Trump to get this big contract. The company starts to turn around. All the while, people are protesting Palantir in the street. Why would someone want to protest a company like Palantir?
I think for the most part, they have been protesting because Palantir had contracts with ICE to help Donald Trump secure the border. And they had a contract that existed prior to the election of Trump, but of course Trump changed, what ICE was doing. Palantir was kind of party to that, was as critics see it, complicit in that, and they renewed the contract after the fact.
Behind me, you see a group of protesters who are protesting against Palantir out of fear that they might build a Muslim registry. We're going to go talk to them about why they're here.
But there's another issue that I think was bubbling up even before this that is probably worth talking about. Now, over the years, Palantir has been sort of, like I said, the kind of Thiel philosophy is basically like it's great for startups to kind of push the limits. It's good to sometimes break the rules. And we've seen Palantir over the years push the ethical limits in various ways that have created, cause for concern among privacy advocates. So the first and possibly the most concerning instance, back in its early days, Palantir pitched a program for like a large financial institution to conduct an information operation against journalists who were, favorable to WikiLeaks. So there are these slides talking about basically like trying to intimidate Glenn Greenwald, the journalist who had been, he's the one who Snowden leaked the documents to, and Palantir was involved with that. They apologized. CEO Alex Karp, who's still CEO, said, I had no idea about this. We'd never do this. But as I talk about in the book, the people who were actually involved in putting this together did not get dismissed. And in fact, they got promoted. So they didn't act as if this was something that was super bad. So there are questions about kind of privacy and just how great they are as custodians, of people's private information or as a company that makes software that ultimately helps guard people's private information. And then there is the connections to the Trump administration.
Good evening. I'm Peter Thiel. I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
Now, while this is happening, Thiel and his allies have been beating the drum and started to beat the drum basically for the past couple of years about the extent to which they see Silicon Valley as being hostile to conservatives, and in particular, anybody who wants to do business with the U.S. government. So he, with great fanfare, announced in 2018 that he was moving to Los Angeles. And because he said Silicon Valley has basically become, North Korea, and it's not comfortable to be here. And we saw that message kind of get amplified and kind of built upon by Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir.
As the pandemic recedes, do you move back to Palo Alto, or are you in New Hampshire for good?
I'm pretty happy outside the monoculture in New Hampshire, and I like living free here.
Does Palantir stay in Silicon Valley?
Actually, if I had to guess, I would guess something like Colorado, but we haven't decided.
Now, I think it's not just that. I think like the pandemic and the way that it's led to this kind of diaspora of tech workers who basically left the Bay Area to work remotely. That has sort of opened the door to tech companies moving outside of Silicon Valley in a way that they probably wouldn't have thought so. But I think Palantir, partly because of Thiel and partly because they are invested in the politics of this, chose to present it that way and chose to present the move as something that was, having to do with the fact that Silicon Valley was inhospitable to a defense contractor.
So Max, I know this last question is not really your specialty. I mean, you just came from this big project on Thiel, but we're here in Denver. We care about the impact. And I know that when you're not writing about Thiel, you're a reporter with Bloomberg Business Week. And so what do you think we can expect in terms of maybe like the more urban impacts of a company like Palantir moving here?
The knock on these companies is that the workers come in, they're very privileged, right? Now I'm talking about the Bay Area, right? The typical tech worker, wakes up in San Francisco at, 7 o'clock in the morning, gets on a private bus from San Francisco that drives him or her down to Palo Alto and spends, and where he or she goes to Facebook or Google or Palantir, where they spend the next 12 to 14 hours in that building for the most part. And maybe they go for a bike ride or something, but these campuses have catered meals, they have laundry, they have gyms, they have yoga, they have everything you could possibly want. And in fact, Silicon Valley companies have sort of designed themselves to cater to the every need of their employees so that they never leave. And, that's great. If you're a tech worker, you get paid, a couple $100,000, $300,000 a year, very few expenses, you don't pay for any of your meals. And, but it's not super great for the surrounding communities. Now, I don't know. I think there are some reasons to be a little more optimistic, right? And not assume that it's just you're just going to get the same, you're just going to have Denver's going to turn into Mountain View or something, where it's just a bunch of corporate campuses and then third wave coffee shops and nothing else. Because the things that make, Palo Alto or whatever objectionable, as I'm saying, from an economic development standpoint, are also objectionable to many of the workers, right? They don't want to live in these apartheid-like cities where there's a tech overclass and everybody else. And that's why many of them, left San Francisco or left the Bay Area in the first place and moved to places like Denver, during the pandemic. So I think in some ways Palantir is chasing these people. And so it's actually these people that are going to decide, what the workers who are going to decide what the economic impact is. I also think that Palantir, had a great run during the Trump administration, right? They've grown a lot, and now it's not clear what's going to happen next, right? I think it's so far so good, but again, these contracts tend to be political. There's also a historic stock market bubble right now. And of course, a lot of these employees are really benefiting from that. Those things could go away. Palantir, the political winds are going to shift at some point. That will hurt Palantir. The stock market will dip. That will hurt Palantir. But it's possible that could actually help Denver, because the way these ecosystems work is that if some of them left Palantir, a lot of them probably stay and start companies. And I mean, that's the main way that economic development has happened, in the Bay Area. And with a company like Palantir that has this, I think the bloom is off the rose a little bit with them, but they had a long run where they were the hot employer in Silicon Valley. They were competing with Facebook and Google. So you have a lot of really brilliant people who work at the company, and they are not all going to work there their entire lives. And some of them are going to start companies, and hopefully from an economic development standpoint, they'll start some companies there and raise money. There's already a venture capital community there. So you could imagine that that Denver actually has some of the infrastructure where it could do something with this, rather than just be in a situation where, it's just an island of tech that doesn't actually peel off. So I would be optimistic, even though I think that the stated rationale is kind of bogus, but I think it could actually have a positive impact.
Since that interview with Max Chafkin, we have not heard any reports of former Palantir employees starting new companies in Denver. The only former Palantir employees that have made headlines, in fact, were a group of former software engineers who signed a letter to NPR last month saying that Palantir has abandoned its own values. They allege that the company has become, quote, increasingly complicit in normalizing authoritarianism under the guise of a revolution led by oligarchs. And then there was the former Palantir employee Juan Pinto, who told More Perfect Union that he left the company once he realized that, quote, using artificial intelligence as a sort of panacea solution, and especially when they're wielded by people with a very distinct agenda, puts everyone at risk.
Fundamentally, the mission that is pushed to employees is that we're solving the world's hardest problems and supporting Western institutions. That is the main driver of sort of this militaristic culture that is developed inside of Palantir.
These former employees spoke out after Palantir signed a $30 million deal to provide AI surveillance software to ICE. We'll put links to both of those stories in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell Palantir CEO Alex Karp about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later.
As we kind of increasingly live in a simulated world, we lose touch with reality and the human decisions that matter, and we move closer towards governance by algorithm. And when I see DOGE kind of going into every agency and addressing the IT department first, I see it as an opportunity to try to change reality itself.